because he told me. He said, first-class personal servant. He does things without being asked. That's consciousness. And for us, that's Krishna, that's Guru consciousness. You should know. Every day he's doing the same thing. So before him, you're preparing everything. So he'd be in the bathroom before lunch. And I put his kopin on the bed. I put his dhoti on the bed. I put his kurta on the bed. I buttoned 2 buttons on the kurta, because that was 2 less buttons. He had the button, and his head fit in through the kurta. So all these things, it was just taking care. It was learning how one would be if you love someone. This was the training. This is how he was training. He didn't tell me, he didn't nag me, as we would say, every day. You should know this, you should know. It was never like that. But he would give you a little hint. First-class servant, he does without being asked. He said the second-class servant, you ask him and he does it. A third-class servant either doesn't do it, or he said he does it begrudgingly. I always loved Prabhupada's English. His words would so capture. They could capture so much what he wanted to say. He didn't just use your everyday words you see over and over and over. They were very well chosen. So he said he does it begrudgingly. So that was the thing, is to know. We should always know what to do. Prabhupada, I was with him on morning walks for 2.5 years. He never stumbled over a rock because he wasn't paying attention. When he walked with his head straight, looking forward. He had the unique ability to look like he was royalty and be very humble at the same time. Both things. You'd see him before the deity, standing there, but then doing dandavats, but so carefully as well. Everything he did looked perfect. So they could come into the room, and maybe they'd get to see him. He had the mirror, then he would open. It was a compact. We say compact. And, the women used to be the powder was, and you had the mirror. So that's what he had. He just opened up. It was a mirror, and it was a picture of Guru Maharaj. And he had the ball. And he would take the little spoon. He didn't pour from the lotus. He put the little spoon in, put a couple drops of water in. Then he got his ball. You could sit there and watch him. He could be completely oblivious to everyone because he was focused on what he was doing all the time. It wasn't like doing one thing and watching over here, see who's looking at him. No, he just, and then of course there's that one picture you see. There's one picture you see Prabhupada, and he's like, and that's just watching how he did each spot of his body. You could see every day, and he did everywhere. He didn't think, well, I'm going to put a kurta on so I can skip all the inside place. No one will know anyway. No, he did everything all the time. And then he would chant Gayatri mantra. And of course he had sannyas mantra in addition, added on to the Gayatri mantra. So now you're sitting in the room. Prabhupada's behind the desk, sitting straight, got his hand under his kurta. So what does everyone do? You chant your Gayatri mantra. Prabhupada's chanting, we're chanting. So for me, that was always meant, now we're going to have fun. Because Prabhupada also knew, see, as serious as he was also very funny. All the qualities are there. There's not just gravity, not just being great. There's also a very good sense of humor. Prabhupada, after all, just have to go back to his childhood and know. Prabhupada was a bit mischievous. Prabhupada says, an intelligent child breaks the mridanga to see what's inside making the noise. That's the child. Prabhupada, when he was a young boy, you all know the story about the guns, right? His father took him out. He was always going out with his father. The other thing I saw and I heard over and over again, was how much love there was in that family. How much Prabhupada loved his mother and father. We know how much he speaks about his father so much. How he credits his father for giving him Krishna consciousness. Huh? Everyone he met, what did he say? Please, he would give his donation and said, please, just you bless my son that he become servant of Srimati Radharani. That was his prayer. And that was the result. A few times he said to me, when speaking about his father, that was the one, he told a story about his father. He said, when I was young, now this he said was about 8 years old, his father would take him out, they'd go shopping. He said there was one store, this is in Calcutta, so it was a shoe store. And he said in it, they had English shoes. He said, and he wanted a pair of shoes. Every day that he was passing, he wanted these shoes. He said they were leather shoes from England. And that was like very... So his father bought him the shoes. He said, I liked them very much. He's telling me this as I'm giving him a massage in the evening, sitting on his bed under a mosquito net with him. That was, they often say, my most favorite moments. There's so many of them, but that's one of them. Being in a bed, a single bed, with Prabhupada under a mosquito net, because it's like you're in a tent with him. It's like you're camping out with Prabhupada. See, this was, I had my own little fantasy world when I was with Prabhupada. So when I was in there, that was it. There was no other world. There was just Prabhupada and me in the tent. So that in itself was beyond belief. And then you're massaging him and he starts telling you stories. It happened just 3-4 times. He's told me all these childhood pastimes. So he said about the shoes. So I'm trying to envision Prabhupada walking as a young child. It was always very difficult. He would talk about his childhood. I would try to see that child. Because when he told you, when Prabhupada told stories, they were live action stories. Like he was there, you know? And he would very often, if there were different characters, he would like speak in their way. So he really brought you in. And the whole time you're doing your service. Everything is connected to that. That was always my realization was you do service, you get nectar. You don't do service, you don't get anything. You get the miseries of the material world. Huh? But if you're engaged in service, just like we're doing here, it's been difficult getting my way here over the last 6 days. There's been a lot of travel, missed night sleeps, but there's no regret. It's just ecstasy because I'm just with Prabhupada, because you're with Prabhupada. That's what we want. That was what Prabhupada did. You know, that was his trick. He infected us. I was with him personally. He infected you with his love. You know, and you can't get away from that. When someone gives you unconditional love, what choice do you have but to try to serve that person? A person of such elevated standing, a person from the spiritual world. You just have to serve him because he's just so wonderful. That's what he did. He just bonded you with how much he cared for you. So is this somebody's? So I'm just massaging him and he starts talking. I'll go from the beginning. Before the massage, this is in June 1975. So every evening, Prabhupada has hot milk, boiling hot milk, a little sugar or honey. And sometimes he'd have puris and sabji. It was very amazing because he had full lunch at 1 o'clock. So now, 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, he'd ring his bell and he'd say, you can make me paratha and potato eggplant. Imagine. And I do it, and next night, so one night he showed me how to make parathas, another night showed me how to make cabbage and potato with puris. And always there's sandesh, or gulab jamun, or rasgulla on the plate. Every meal, dairy and sugar was on his plate. Every meal there was a sweet and there was dairy. So he called me in that evening in his room and he said, tonight, he said, make puffed rice. Muri. We call it muri. We call it puffed rice and peanuts. Chance, ghee, little ghee, chance, turmeric, salt, usual things. And peanuts. And then you cut cucumber on the side. So he said, tonight make that. He said, because this morning, which means 1 o'clock in the morning, midnight, 1:30 in the morning, he said this morning it was difficult to get up to translate. He said, because of digestion. So he's saying, I don't want to eat so much tonight because I want to make sure I'm up and I can do my translating work. Everything's about service. Everything he would tell you, somehow or other, it had to do with service. Even if it just seemed like he was just talking to you. Because just talking to you, he's like infecting you with his love. We told this the other night in Australia on a morning walk. You know, Prabhupada always... So he said, the devotee, he is simple or crooked. He'd stop for these questions. When he would ask, he would stop. The whole walk stopped. So that was one of the times you saw being attentive. Because he would stop, people be bumping into one another. Sometimes they'd bump into Prabhupada. Oh, that was bad. And he'd say, very bad. In so many ways, it was just bad. But it just, we don't pay attention. So he said, the guru, not the guru, he's a pure devotee, he is simple or crooked. Any takers? There's only 2 answers. What do we know? What do we learn in Krishna consciousness? What is a devotee? Huh? He didn't say it that way. He said simple or crooked. He was making you make a choice. See, that's what it was like. Because no one wants to give a wrong answer. That's what it was like when we were with Prabhupada. Because as soon as he asked a question, you figured this is a trick. Prabhupada was expert at trick questions. Anyway, so finally one devotee, it was, anyway, that'll come up, Amoga. Prabhupada, he's simple. Prabhupada shake his head with satisfaction because you got the wrong answer. Although, if he would have said crooked, Prabhupada might have looked at him and said, nonsense, what do you mean crooked? But anyway, that's speculation. But he said, no, he's crooked. He said, just like all of you. He said, I've tricked you into becoming Krishna conscious. Because what do we say? People come in the door, just chant this mantra and be happy. Then you find out chanting that mantra, although there's no hard and fast rules, there's a lot of not so hard and fast rules that apparently are there. That unless you do it, you don't make much progress. So that's the trick, he said. We've tricked you all. What was I speaking about just before that? Going off on that tangent. Anyone remember? Yes, the child, thank you. Yes. So, we're in the bedroom, it's dark. You don't turn on a light in the bedroom at night. It's whatever ambient light is coming from outside. So you're in the dark, under the mosquito net, with your spiritual master, and squeezing. So that evening I made him his puffed rice and peanuts, hot milk, sandesh. So now we're in the bedroom. So now we just had puffed rice. So I'm massaging. That's the connection, service. I'm massaging. I never stop. It's not like I stop to listen to him, tell me a story. No, that's not the relationship. You're always doing your service. So I'm under there massaging. He goes, my mother, she made first-class puffed rice. So now he's That's it. He's gone back, gone way back. He said she was expert cook. He said we had a big wok, and the wok was filled with sand, right? You make it very, very hot. Then you throw the rice in, whatever kind of rice is used for puffing. And so he described the process because he watched. Prabhupada again, attentive. He watched. And you'll understand why, what that means. He said, my sister, she's also expert cook. Pishima, auntie, Pishima. We called her Pishima, auntie. Baba Tarini was his god sister. His little sister was his god sister too. He said she was expert cook. He said my mother taught her cooking. Now, again, he's lying in bed, eyes closed. I'm also an expert cook. He said, but I learned just by watching. So that's what he always did from his very youth. And he, like he said, he was super expert. He wasn't taught by seeing. He learned. He would just see. I mean, most of us, hopefully we can learn something sometimes by watching. But Prabhupada was expert at everything. He said in my youth, he said, they would have parties, festivals, he said, and they would do potluck. Everyone would make something and bring something. So he was just remembering, enjoying. And then he said, aha. Then he said, my mother, he said, I asked her one evening, you make me puris. She said, no, Abhay, it's too late. She said, I'll make you muri, puffed rice. Prabhupada, so many times, threes are very important, because the third time, whatever's going to happen, it's going to happen. He's going to let you know what it is you're doing on the third time. So this was one of those 3-time kind of, even from his childhood. He said, so again, I want puris. He said, and my mother said, he said, mother. He didn't say Mataji, he didn't say Mati, so my mother is speaking to me. And he said, no, I want puris. She said, no, I'll make you puffed rice. It's too late. So then the third time he said, I want puris. He said, and my father said, if he wants puris, you make him puris. And then he said, perhaps my father knew. And that's all he said about that, was perhaps my father knew. He said that to me twice. There are different things he said to me twice that were very wonderful. So he said that 2 different times, perhaps my father knew. Now I didn't ask, what did he know? Because I made it. And I thought if he wanted me, but I understood what he meant. That this was the person. This was the person who's going to deliver the entire world. Prabhupada also, see, he was doing it. That also is involved later on. So then he said that. So then my mother made me puris. Because father said, you make him puris if he wants puris. See? This is the relationship he had with his parents. Huh? So it seems like his mother was more the disciplinarian than the father. And then he said, so now he's already back there. He's in his childhood. He said our life was very nice. He said we weren't wealthy. He said, but we had everything we needed. He said mango season. We had a basket filled with mangoes. He said my sister and I, we would run around the house. He said anytime we wanted, we could just grab a mango. In his way, he was saying we had everything. We had everything we could. What else do you need other than a place to sleep, something to eat? So he said there was plenty. There was plenty, he said. So these shoes, go back to the shoes. So then he started telling the story about the shoes. But somehow he's just in his childhood. He's remembering events like we all do. The first thing I can recall, I was 4 years old. My father died when I was 3. I have no recollection of him at all. I remember 4 years old, my big sister fell on me and broke my arm. So that was, but see, it's something that I'll always remember. It's just one of those things. But Prabhupada, he remembered. So he could tell you stories from his childhood. He said once he remembers being in his sister's arms. He said, maybe I was 6 months old. He said, I remember her holding me on her lap at 6 months old. And of course, there's the famous letter that he wrote to Tamal Krishna Maharaj, saying, there was never a time that I did not remember Krishna. He said, not one time in his life, he said, he was not remembering Krishna. So he gave that revelation. So Prabhupada wanted these shoes. He said they were English shoes. He had a fascination. And he said they were leather shoes, which made them, I guess, even more desirable at the time. So I was trying to think of Prabhupada, envision him in my mind. He said I would walk to school in those shoes. He was very proud of the shoes. So now I'm thinking, and he's drawing me in. So I said, Prabhupada, I said, when you would walk in them, I said, did you used to look at them as you were walking? And he started laughing and laughing. Yes, he said, yes, I would watch them as I was walking. He was very proud. He was a child, like any child. But of course, what he learned from his parents, his family, was worshiping the deity, Rath Yatra festivals. He said, there's only one thing in ISKCON that I didn't learn in my childhood. Everything, he said, that I'm giving you, he said, I was doing from my childhood. Everything you're doing. He said, I was doing that. You have Rath Yatra festivals, of course, Janmashtami, everything. He said, just one thing. What's that? Well, books. Yeah, book translation, the translation work. And that was his, other than that, he said everything was the same. He wasn't translating books at that. So that's what he said at that time. So I saw him, that was what Prabhupada was funny. And that's how I would react. I would try to see and say something that could bring Prabhupada's humor. It was the very first thing that I saw with Srila Prabhupada that just, let me say, sealed the deal. We would say, when I saw that, I understood, this is what I want. This happened, I was given first initiation in New York in July 1971, July 22nd, 1971. Exactly 3 months to the day from when I moved into